If you think the antagonist of your story is just the bad guy or the villain, you're missing the whole point and your story is suffering because of it. Because real antagonism, it's way more powerful and way more important than that to your story. So in this video, I'm going to make sure you understand what true antagonism is and how to add it to your story in a way that readers will love. Now, my name is Tim Gro. I'm the CEO of StoryGrid, where we teach writers how to write books that actually work. I'm the author of 6 books, including my most recent, The Shithead, which has been praised by New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling authors. Everything I teach is built on the expertise of StoryGrid's founder, Sean Coyne, an editor, writer, and story researcher with over 30 years of experience in publishing. His track record is an 86% success rate in the marketplace, while traditional publishing doesn't even crack 35%. So if you're here to learn how to tell a story that keeps readers hooked, you're in the right place. So if you don't get the source of antagonism right in your story, from the full macro story to the individual scenes, your story is going to fall flat. So even if you pour your heart into it and craft beautiful prose and try to come up with compelling characters, it's still not going to do the job. You've got to nail the source of antagonism for your protagonist, because that's where all of the change and conflict in the story comes from. So let's look at antagonism and what it really is, and then how you can apply it in the right way to your story to make sure it's something that readers love to read. Now, I know when we hear the word antagonist, I'm the same way. We immediately go to maybe our favorite villain from one of our favorite movies and books. But here's the truth. Antagonism isn't just a bad guy. It's any force that opposes your protagonist's goal. So let me say that again, because this changes everything. Antagonism is any force that opposes your protagonist's goal. So that could be a person, obviously, but it could also be a snowstorm, a social norm, or a ticking clock, or even the protagonist's own fear. So think about the Cyclone in The Wizard of Oz, or the societal rules in Pride and Prejudice, or, and this might surprise you, but Trinity and Morpheus in The Matrix. In the beginning of that movie, they're allies, but they still act as antagonist forces. They push Neo to face a truth that he is not ready for, and that is antagonism. This is what makes stories interesting. It's not the hero being awesome, it's the hero being tested. So what makes antagonism actually work? Well, it all comes down to a battle for control. So here's the core dynamic. The antagonist applies pressure. They want something from the protagonist, or they want the protagonist to do something, and the protagonist resists. And then boom, now we've got a high stakes struggle. That tug of war is the engine behind every compelling scene of your book. So if there's no pressure, no struggle, no tension, there's no story. Think about the antagonist in The Hound of the Baskervilles. The villain's actions are constant, lurking threat. It's not just about one big showdown, it's relentless pressure over time that keeps the reader on the edge of their seat and Sherlock Holmes on his toes. So let's zoom in a little more at this idea of antagonism and how it shows up in the scene-by-scene level of your writing. So what exactly does a good antagonist do? What kind of actions are they taking in every scene of your story? Well, it's 3 things. First, they seek control. They want to dominate the situation. Number 2, they try to break down resistance. So they're not just showing up, they're actively trying to crush the protagonist's will. They want to win. And they do not stop. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing until something or someone breaks. And it is this source of antagonism that forces your protagonist to act. So your protagonist pushes back, they resist, and they cling to their own autonomy, to their own values, and their own identity. And that right there creates the emotional glue that keeps readers locked into your story. Because at the heart of every great scene is the question, who's going to win the battle for control? The source of antagonism or the protagonist? And this is where I come back to the huge mistake that I see all the time in people's writings is that writers only think about the full macro story level antagonist, the big baddie, right? The Empire, Voldemort, the Capitol. And that's important, but it's only one layer. You also need scene level antagonism. Yes, in every single scene, because every scene has to have conflict, and that conflict has to start somewhere with an inciting incident, which means that's going to be the antagonist of that scene. So ask yourself, in this scene, what's the obstacle? What's creating the resistance? What's creating that inciting incident? Because if your protagonist just waltzes through and gets what they want with no pushback, the scene didn't need to exist. It's flat, it's dead on arrival. So you need this conflict at both levels, the big macro story level and the micro scene by scene level. All right, so let's look at an example. So in the Hunger Games, the Capitol is the story level antagonist, and they're represented by President Snow. But in any given scene, Katniss may be fighting dehydration, hallucinations, a betrayal from another tribute. Those smaller antagonist forces matter because they're linked to the bigger struggle. And that's the trick. That's how you connect those dots. Okay, so now let's make this practical. How do you start strengthening the antagonism in your writing? So let's walk through a few different ways that we've come up with here at StoryGrid. So first of all, you want to match the antagonism to your genre. So in a thriller, you need an antagonist that's constantly escalating the danger for the protagonist and other characters. In a romance, you need forces that are keeping the lovers apart, sometimes even within themselves. And in a crime, the antagonist clouds the truth, plants red herrings, and misleads both the reader and the sleuth. So you have to make sure the antagonist forces fit your genre, the conventions of the genre that you're writing in. Number two, you want your form of antagonism to be constantly raising the stakes for your protagonist. If the antagonist is just a nuisance, it doesn't really matter. The best stories layer three types of stakes. You have external, what happens in the physical world. If I don't win the duel, I will die. The internal, the emotional consequences. So if I lose, I'll never prove I'm enough. And the philosophical, the bigger meaning. If this lie wins, it means justice is dead. The more layers that you build into your antagonism, the more deeply your reader cares about what happens next, which means they're more likely to keep turning those pages so they actually read your whole book. And then finally, you need to be able to test your source of antagonism to make sure that it actually works. So here's a few questions to ask yourself when you're writing your scenes. Can the protagonist easily win or avoid this struggle? If that's a yes, then your antagonism is too weak and you need to strengthen your antagonism. Number two, does the outcome matter deeply to both sides? You need both the protagonist and the source of antagonism to care deeply about what's happening in this scene. If they don't care about the outcome, then you need, again, to strengthen your form of antagonism. Number three, is the antagonist relentless? You need the antagonist to not give up. They need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. This is what raises the tension in the scene and makes sure that the protagonist can't get off the hook easily. And then number four, does the conflict align with your genre and theme? You need the antagonist to be pulled from the genre conventions of the book that you are writing. If it's not, your story is going to feel disjointed and your reader's going to get confused. So these are all the elements of antagonism you need to be hitting. And if you're doing that, you're definitely on the right track. Okay, so let's put it all together. Antagonism is not just about villains and bad guys. It's about pressure. It's about creating friction between what your character wants and what the world or someone in it is doing to stop them from getting what they want. So look at your story again. Again, everything from the big macro storytelling down to individual scenes. And ask yourself, does your protagonist face meaningful opposition in every single part of your story? Is there something or someone standing in the protagonist's way of getting what actually matters to them? And are the stakes real and layered and big so that it actually matters what decisions the protagonists make? And is the pressure unrelenting? We cannot let your protagonist just rest. The antagonist has to constantly be forcing your protagonist to make tough decisions. And here's the thing I want you to see, because we're spending all of this time talking about antagonism, but it's the stronger that your antagonist is, the more your protagonist shines. So if you want your protagonist to be seen and loved by your reader, the way to do that isn't by focusing on the protagonist, it's by focusing on the antagonism and making sure they're strong and pushing on the protagonist, because then the reader will fall in love with your protagonist. Because we don't fall in love with characters because they're cool or clever or brave. We fall in love with them because we see them struggle. We see them face enormous odds and fight back anyway. That's what makes readers care. So as you've seen, this antagonist force doesn't just apply to the big bad guy of your whole story. It has to show up in a scene by scene level. And that's why we spend so much time talking about scene writing and helping writers nail their scenes. Because if you can't write a great scene that keeps the reader turning pages, you can never write a novel. So that's why we've run the scene writing workshop. These have been life-changing for the writers that have been a part of it. They make more progress in 6 weeks with us than 6 years of trying to do it on their own. And in these workshops, the big thing that makes a difference is the one-on-one feedback. Every week, you write a scene, turn it in, and you get professional feedback on what you did right, what you did wrong, and what to fix in the coming week. Most of our hundreds of students say that alone is worth the price of the workshop, but of course we don't stop there. We have weekly live training. You join a community of other writers dedicated to the craft of becoming a great writer. There's daily exercises that you get feedback on as well, and much, much more. So make sure you go to storygrid.com/workshop to find out more about our upcoming workshop and join us for the next one, because the last 4 of them have completely sold out. So if you're interested at all, make sure you jump in, because one's coming up soon and we would love to have you. Now, of course, the source of antagonism is just one part of a working scene. And so I want to give you a free resource that we use here at StoryGrid, and it's our 13-point scene writing checklist. So when we are looking at student scenes and giving them feedback, this is a checklist we use to make sure that it's working or not working and how they can fix it. And I want to give you a copy of that for absolutely free. You can go to storygrid.com/checklist now, fill in some information. I'm going to send you that, but I'm not just going to send you the checklist. I'm going to send you a walkthrough on how you can use it with your own writing. So again, go to storygrid.com/checklist to download your copy now. Now, I have another video that takes this idea of antagonism and twists it in a really interesting way. And so that's up on your screen right now, so I recommend watching that next. But either way, thanks so much for being a writer. Thanks for being a part of our community here at StoryGrid, and I'll see you next time.